Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. There's a dangerous new idea in the news this week, and it's called an idea, which is the ability to live without food. The word comes from Catholic tradition, whereby saints were said to have been able to live long periods of time without any sustenance but the Eucharist. As always, modern humans have taken this idea to a whole new level of stupidity by following a practice called breatharianism. Rather than eat or drink, followers of the breatharian diet gulp air. Feeling hungry? Just gulp air. Thirsty? Gulp more air. On the plus side, this air-gulping diet saves time and energy that would normally be spent on cleaning up or washing the dishes. On the downside, many soon die of starvation. But anyway, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this stupid diet sounds a whole lot like central banking. And you'd be right. When the economy is starving, followers of the central banking diet don't turn to wealth creation for sustenance. They gulp air. Yes, credit is created out of thin air. Need a job? Here's where Ben Bernanke does. He gulps air. Markets crashing? Janet Yellen just gulps air. And just as with breatharianism, the upside is that a whole lot of time and energy is saved in not actually having to work for a living. On the downside, many soon will die of starvation. Stacy, this sounds like an excellent diet.
Well, let's look at this diet of gulping air as applied to central banking first. The government-dominated bond market. This is an article about JP Morgan's report looking at supply and demand in the global bond market in 2014. And the black and gray bars are government and official demand, i.e. government and government. And central bank buying accounts for 1.6 trillion, more than half of the bond buying so far this year.
Right. Well, I feel this conversation inevitably moving toward this idea of the Eucharist and transubstantiation, which was part of the Catholic tradition, that the wafer and the wine are not virtual facsimiles of Jesus, but they are actually, through the process of transubstantiation, actual what can I say? It's actually Jesus. It's Jesus. This is Jesus. Yeah. So this is what the central banks have taken on. It's transubstantiation as applies to monetary theory and quantitative easing. When they buy back their own bonds, they are recognizing the fact that their activity is not a virtual facsimile of an economic activity, but it is godlike in that it is the activity that is the economy itself. It has, Ben Bernanke has become a godhead. And instead of walking on water, he's walking on paper. I'm walking on paper. Yeah, yeah. I'm walking on paper. Yeah, yeah. But I don't think we're going to have a Lazarus-like moment, you know, where they put him in the crypt and then he goes up to heaven. I think they're going to put this guy into the crypt and the economy is going to go stinko, southo, obliterato.
Well, Felix Salmon looks deeper into this JP Morgan article and the report about the bond buying. And what they find is, meanwhile, private banks are taking the opposite side of the trade. While they were huge buyers of bonds in 2007 and 2008, they're net sellers in 2013 and 2014, more or less completely negating the buying pressure from pension funds, insurance companies, bond funds, and retail investors. In 2014, it seems substantially all the net demand for bonds is going to come from the official sector. They're gulping air. This is credit creation out of thin air.
Yes, yes, they're gulping air. The banks are not playing the game as they have been, so the intensity of the feedback loop of fraud is becoming more pronounced. And this is typically what you find at the tail end of a cult. When the cult leaders, whether it's the Hale-Bopp Comet cult or the Jim Jones suicide cult, when the deliverance of their cultish behavior does not manifest, then mass suicide ensues. And this, of course, is the American economy. In the British economy, George Osborne is a cultist, encouraging the British people to commit financial suicide en masse. And this is what you see every single day.
Now, this final quote here from Felix Salmon is quite entertaining. As a stylized fact, the bond market is dominated on both sides by the official sector. Private participants might sit in the middle as market makers or try to borrow money here or there. But overall, what you're looking at when you look at the bond market is government issuing debt and governments buying it.
Well, it's called monetizing debt,
Yes.
which is fraud. And they don't call it monetization, they call it quantitative easing. But Janet Yellen will be kind of like a remake of Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, where she's going to be every month at the Federal Open Market Policy Committee saying, you buying from me? You buying from me? You buying from me? You know, she's going to have that hog face stuck in a mirror somewhere. You buying from me? You know, and this will be the policies going forward, and then she'll go out on some kind of murder spree.
Well, the thing about breatharianism is, you know, you do need sustenance. This is why people die, because the gulping air apparently doesn't work. You need nutrients, minerals, water. And the same thing for the global economy. The bond market is supposed to be part of the sustenance of capitalism, of entrepreneurialism, of, you know, making thingism. So the fact that it's just the government feeding itself and eating itself and just the government, that's why the rest of the private sector is dying.
Well, here's the really ironic thing as we head into the end of the year. The tulip bulb mania is alive and well in the U.S. Treasury market, whereas Bitcoin is actually, by comparison, solid gold. And there's no overbuying of Bitcoin. Bitcoin has not even begun its bull market yet. We're just seeing a prelude because it's actual money. Whereas the bond market is a tulip bulb mania. The bond market, people are actually buying. The government's buying, as you point out, like they're gulping air. They're breatharians to buy these tulip bulbs of U.S. Treasury bonds.
Well, you know what happens, of course, when you breathe in too much air. It, you know, comes out as hot air on the other end, and that's what the bond market looks like to me.
Yes, well, there was the La Petite Poutois, a circus act in France 100 years ago who could sing the national anthem from his buttocks after gulping copious quantities of air. It was covered in Ricky Jay's classic Cards as Weapons, or was it the follow-up? I can't remember. But look that up online, and you'll find that this is really an art form. And Janet Yellen, of course, gives it a sexy angle when she's stripped naked and flatulating her way to quantitative easing in 2014. I can't hardly wait.
Well, speaking of gas and oil, you know, that's the energy to the global economy. That is actually the energy for the bond market and all industry. And that's in the news. There's a lot of gulping air there. And the FT reports that toil for oil means industry sums do not add up. So rising costs are being met only by an ever smaller increases in supply. This is the WEO, the World Energy Outlook, published by the International Energy Agency, Max. And they say, according to the 2013 WEO, the total world oil supply in 2012 was 87.1 million barrels a day, an increase of 11.9 million barrels over the 75.2 million barrels per day produced in 2000. But only 1/3 of that, Max, comes from conventional oil. 2/3 of it comes from unconventional crude, which is light oil, oil sands, and deep ultra deep water oil, and they come with a higher cost. The other is natural gas liquids, NGLs, and they come with lower energy density. So you're putting a whole lot more money in and getting a whole lot less energy out.
Right, so that is the definition of peak oil. So if you look at the economics of the oil industry, the world hit peak oil in 2005, which is to say that the economics of the oil industry started to go in reverse in 2005. The incremental benefits from the excess cost of extracting energy from planet Earth went into decline. We hit peak oil. That is an irrefutable fact. But like so many other irrefutable facts these days, people tend to just dismiss it out of hand because it doesn't correlate with their ideology based on looking at the world through the prism of their own narcissism. And unfortunately, we have a global glut of narcissists.
Well, the article points out that this capital expenditure, CapEx, has increased enormously, and it's getting exponential at this point, talking about tulip bulbs. So they mentioned, but the sheer scale of the increase is staggering. Upstream outlays have risen more than threefold in real terms over the past 12 years, reaching nearly $700 billion in 2012, compared with only $250 billion in 2000. That's in constant 2012 dollars. But most of that increase from 250 to 700 billion came since 2005. So on the charts, it's very clear that peak oil, now looking in hindsight, exactly did happen in 2005.
Right. The peak oil phenomenon has been masked by 0% interest rates because oil extraction is extremely capital intensive. And had interest rates been allowed to trade at their normalized rate of 5-6% on a 10-year government bond, the peak oil phenomenon would be in stark relief, because people would understand that they have no money to drill oil anymore. Oil would be at $300 or $400 a barrel today. But because they are keeping the floating craps game going with these artificially low interest rates, they're drilling for fraud. You know, that's what Janet Yellen is. That's what Mark Carney does. He's got his fraud drill, and he's drilling for fraud, and he's going deep into the core of fraud to sustain something that's unsustainable, 0% interest rates. And taper talk is nonsense. You cannot taper a Ponzi scheme. Mark Carney knows it. If he doesn't know it, then he's brain dead. Janet Yellen knows it. If she doesn't know it, she's been gulping too much air.
Yeah. Now, just to go over some of the figures that the IEA provides. Right now, a traditional, conventional barrel of oil costs $10 to $70 to produce, depending on which country you are. $10 is going to be the region with all the U.S. military bases around it, the Middle East. It's going to cost you $10 a barrel there. Maybe Russia as well is going to be closer to the $10 barrel. Now, let's look at the unconventional crude oil, because remember, 2/3 of our new oil supply since 2000 has come from unconventionals. $50 to $90 a barrel for oil sands, $50 to $100 for light, tight oil, and $70 to $90 a barrel for ultra deep water. Meanwhile, in terms of energy content, the NGLs, the natural gas liquids, one crude oil barrel is worth 1.4 barrels of those.
Right, so you're saying since 2010, the unconventional, off-peak oil is costing, let's say, $90 to $100 a barrel to extract. That inclusive of interest rates being at 0%. I'm saying when interest rates refine their normalized rate of 5 to 6%, then the cost of drilling and extracting will be $200 a barrel, and that means that no one will be able to afford oil.
Well, let's put this into context about how much more CapEx, how much capital expenditure has gone into oil production versus how much has come out as a result. All of which means the 2013 WEO has the oil industry's upstream CapEx rising by nearly 180% since 2000, but the global oil supply adjusted for energy content by only 14%. The most straightforward interpretation of this data is that the economics of oil have become completely dislocated from historic norms since 2000, and especially since 2005, with the industry investing at exponentially higher rates for increasingly small, incremental yields of energy.
That's right. Oil shock, part 2, just around the corner. All right, Stacy Herbert, we must go because we are freaking out of time.
Okay, Max.
Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to the author of Blackwater. Blackwater, yes, is a book about defense contractors and all their nefarious goings-on around the world. He's also the main protagonist and force behind a great new film out there called Dirty Wars, about American military killing folks, and they got a big kill list and they go kill people. Please welcome Jeremy Scahill.
Max,
yes.
This is Jeremy Scahill.
Yeah, look,
today.
There he is. There's Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy, what's up?
He canceled at the last minute. I was going to get a tub of lard, but I thought that was not only already done, but it was a little bit too right-wing. I thought a red pepper was a little bit more progressive.
Oh, yeah, he's Mr. Fancy Pants now. Yeah, he doesn't come on shows like this anymore. He's Mr. Fancy Pants. He's over there with Pierre, oh my God, I made a few billion with eBay. Pierre, oh my God, who's, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he totally trash the Indian micropayments market, as I recall? There's a bunch of other dirty dealings. He should be writing a book called Dirty Debt by Pierre Omagad, former eBay founder.
Dirty microdebt, yes.
Dirty microdebt. And Jeremy Scahill can go investigate dirty microdebts in India.
Well, by the way, you know, red peppers have 3 times the number of vitamin C you need for the day, and they're also good for premenstrual syndrome. So
really?
I thought that was also very progressive to be a red pepper.
So for PMS, it's an excellent ameliorant yes. in some way. That's fantastic to know, isn't it?
So, you know, we were going to talk about Dirty Wars, and it's opening here. It's already been released in America. So I was going to ask, you know, how it's been doing in America, but because we don't have the stats, I've just turned to Pirate Bay. So if you look here, it is on Pirate Bay. Not that I ever encourage going there, never. But you see there are 255 people trying to download from this one seed here. So it seems like the red pepper should have appeared on the show because our audience is a sort that would have gone out to the movie and seen it.
Is that Dirty Wars or Dirty Media Whores? Which film are we talking about here?
Well, I do know that he spoke at the London School of Economics last night, and he's appeared on BBC and Channel 4. He's done the mainstream media, as you say. He did say at the LSE, according to those people on Twitter who were there, we have to humanize the people on the end of U.S. missiles and night raids. This is what he's saying is one of the themes of Dirty Wars, which is, I think, also the thing that Bono and Geldof have done with Africa, for example. They say just showing how pitiful these starving little children are, that humanizes them and it makes us feel bad. They never put it into context, where Bob Geldof will say, here in front of a bag of Monsanto corn or food products, he'll say, I'll take this because if it saves one person, even though it's destroyed the entire economy and the entire agricultural industry there, we just need to feel good about ourselves by humanizing these poor, starving children.
Right. Bob Geldof, I spoke to him on our radio show in Paris. I asked him a simple question about economics. He had absolutely no idea the relationship between interest rates and bond prices, a complete disconnect. He's financially illiterate. Bono, of course, is a tax dodger. And apparently Jeremy Scahill is also financially illiterate to the point where he doesn't see the connection between humanizing people on the other end of these bombs and how the economics go into it. So he's going to be working for Pierre Omagad, who's destroying microfinance in India, apparently because that's going to contribute to the greater good. It's my same criticism of Greenpeace. Remember, I was over in Greenpeace. I met with the head of Greenpeace, Gerard Leopold, and I said, yeah, you've got 100 million euros in the bank sitting there, and the bank lends it to the corporations that you are protesting against. If you went away and disappeared, you would have a net better result on the environment than doing what you're doing by giving the money to the very corporations that you say you're protesting. So here you have Jeremy, dirty media whores, the red pepper of nonsense, going around saying, well, we should humanize the people on the other end of these missiles, but saying nothing about the economics of the missiles and supporting the very sludge meisters who are out there lending money to create the dehumanization of the people on the other end of the missiles. So here's a duplicitous guy who's, does he cancels at the last second? What kind of schmo is this? Who's he going to go on? Channel 4 so Jon Snow can wear some fancy socks? Go on BBC so somebody can mumble some incoherent nonsense? Why isn't he on this show talking to the people? The people want to know, not these freaking nonsensical faux journalists over there on South Bank.
Well, we saw the film because his people invited us. They wanted us to go there. They wanted him to appear on the show. Apparently, I guess it was he that didn't want to appear once he showed up here. But it's a good film, and it does achieve the humanization of the victims. It does show the consequences there on the ground, and it's quite well directed. But it does not mention ever once, I don't think, oil. Doesn't mention oil, and that was one of your questions for him, which was cui bono, like who in these dirty wars, who's making money? Like how much money is being made, and therefore how do we roll it back? When the U.S. committed the dirty wars of Latin America in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was the Banana Republic thing, really. It was about all the agricultural corporations seizing control down there. So that was hard to stop. But I would like to know that which corporations are benefiting. Obviously, the oil giants. Oil is never mentioned, though. Your thoughts?
Well, it's like this G.I. Jane, Jeremy Scahill is a putz out there, not really looking at the cause and effect. Look at what George Galloway's doing with the killing of Tony Blair. Okay, he crowdfunded the film with the people, not the oligarchs. He's going to show the connect between the killing of Tony Blair and the money the killing Tony Blair is making. And he'll be going to the same places. But he's looking at the whole picture, not just a slice of the picture, trying to ride his high horse, pretending that some moral deficiency is causing the dehumanization of the people on the other end of these missiles, as if all we need to do is somehow make people morally more aware of their actions, and that there will be a magical reconfiguration of this war on terror, which is naive to say the least. No mention of oil. No mention of the banksters, no mention of HSBC, no mention of Barclays, no mention of JP Morgan. So it's a romp through Afghanistan with a guy who looks like G.I. Joe, and it's visually quite stunning because the filmmakers are Hollywood quality visual artistes. But at the end of the day, it leaves you wanting. It leaves you asking a question like, why didn't you actually cover the real story? Why is it just a superficial story?
Since that film was made, the Edward Snowden revelations came out. And now we know that it's not about the war on terror. If you look at the actual metrics of who they're spying on, it very much seems like corporate espionage. Brazil and Germany are huge targets of this NSA spying, for example. Why? It's not because they're like the economic powerhouses of the old world and the new world. And that brings me to this next headline from Wolf Richter. Seems the NSA spied on me when I lived in Belgium. Now he's talking about these NSA revelations and that the Handelsblatt covered. And they looked at an NSA management presentation from 2012. And among other morsels, the presentation bragged about computer network exploitation, CNE, perpetrated by the agency's special shop, the Tailored Access Operations, TAO, where over 1,000 hackers are trying to wiggle up the bureaucratic ladder and get noticed and promoted by hacking more deeply and into more systems than the next guy. They must be having a blast. By mid-2012, the NSA had penetrated 50,000 networks worldwide, including telecom networks. The implants they installed act as sleeper cells. So here we have sleeper cells operating around the internet on behalf of the NSA, on behalf of the corporations, whoever the NSA is working for. So one of the questions was this, is like, which are the sleeper cells in the Middle East? And why is that not even discussed? Why are the drones killing so many children in Yemen? Why are the drones killing so many in Pakistan and Afghanistan? What are the strategic reasons there? And those aren't ever mentioned in Dirty Wars.
Right, because the cost of the bomb is subsidized by borrowed money through 0% interest rates, and it doesn't matter what affiliation. It's just that these particular victims of the bombing are the low-cost victims in the global jihadi perpetrated by HSBC, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs. And that is becoming, as you wipe out the low-cost victims of financial terrorism by HSBC and Barclays and JP Morgan, you're going to have to start targeting people more in your own country. This is what's happening in the UK or the US. Financial terrorism, like we saw with RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, a couple down in Southport, were financially terrorized by Osborne, Cameron, and Royal Bank of Scotland. And that's the point. That's the dirty war. The dirty war is dirty money. It's a dirty money war. So that's why the film, at the end of the day, lacked a lot of oomph, because it failed to get into the real dirty financial aspect of these mass extrajudicial murders. It's all about the money. You know, to think that it's about some kind of a moral deficiency by some group of people is to not understand that since morality doesn't trade on the New York Stock Exchange, there is no morality. There never will be morality. And so you can't even start from a place of morality. You have to start from a place of sublime 360-degree corruption that has no beginning or end. It's a Mobius strip of corruption, and it all goes back to the terrorist of terrorists, the central banks. And to anything less and then to sell out to Joe Blow My Mind, eBay founder Pierre, oh my God, for some big fat paycheck and not come on a show and talk to the people is unconscionable. In my opinion, it shows a lack of professionalism and journalistic integrity.
Well, like I said, there were dirty wars across Latin America, and this film is like just looking at the corpses that have been thrown out of the planes by US-backed dictators there and saying we're trying to humanize the victims here, but without understanding why were people being thrown out of planes? Why were nuns being slaughtered across Central America? Why was that happening? The context, of course, would have been, at the time, I suppose, conspiracy, that it's a like dirty conspiracy theory that any corporations, that they would have any interest in throwing people out of planes.
Yeah, you don't have to dress up like a soldier and play soldier games in Afghanistan, you know, and spend a lot of money on plane tickets and harassing people to death. You just go down to Wall Street. I mean, this is why my #1 journalist in America, without a shadow of a doubt, is Matt Taibbi, because he understands the key problems and he writes about them in ways that people can understand. That's why he's on our show often, because he understands that we're on the side of exploring absolutely the inner machinations of the true war being perpetrated by the true terrorists. Did you catch the name? HSBC, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, Lloyds, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. Where do they factor into the dirty wars? Unless it's just a big, travel video. Well, he should be like that guy who does cooking around the world.
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain. It should be Jeremy Scahill should be doing some couscous in Kabul and doing a cooking show. For all we care about him digging down into the true causes of what's happening on this true dirty war.
Instead of roadkill, like there's that roadkill chef, traveling chef, it should be drone kill.
Drone kill with Jeremy Scahill. There he is in an apron. He could have another outfit on and another wardrobe guy and more mascara, and he could be like, "Oh, it's drone kill."
And actually, I'm going to give him this red pepper, and we're going to send it to him as his first episode of this traveling cooking show.
Right. It's Cook Wars with Jeremy Scahill. Okay. Well, Stacy, we got to go.
Ciao, Max.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, the Red Pepper, standing in for the journalist known as Jeremy Scahill. Until next time. Oh, by the way, if you want to reach us on Twitter, you can use Keiser Report. Bye, y'all.